30 grocery items that will be impossible to find by end of March 2025. It's happening faster than anyone imagined. Across grocery stores, staples are vanishing at a terrifying pace. Analysts and officials are sounding the alarm. By the end of March 2025, dozens of everyday food items could virtually disappear from shelves, victims of economic turmoil and climate catastrophe. This isn't a drill or a distant warning. It's unfolding right now, backed by USDA reports, FAO forecasts, and supply chain experts. From skyrocketing prices to failed harvests, the forces driving these shortages are unprecedented. In this urgent briefing, we break down 30 essential groceries on the brink of being impossible to find, each with shocking data that underscore the severity of the crisis. Brace yourself. The scope of this food shortage is like nothing we've experienced, and it's accelerating with each passing day. Eggs. The breakfast staple is becoming a luxury. A relentless avian flu outbreak has decimated egg-laying flocks, killing over 26 million hens in the U.S. just in the first 2 months of 2025. The result? Egg prices exploded 53% year over year, shattering records and leaving shelves empty. By now, many stores impose limits or have no eggs at all. The USDA projects egg prices to jump another 41% in 2025, but that assumes you can even find a carton. Farmers can't replenish flocks fast enough before the virus strikes again. Consumers are horrified to find fridge cases barren where eggs once stood. This once cheap protein is disappearing in real time, a distressing bellwether of the broader food crisis. Chicken. You might have thought chicken would be safe. Think again. America's favorite protein is under siege from multiple fronts. Feed prices are soaring as corn crops drown in floods and scorch in droughts, driving up costs to raise poultry. Even worse, the avian flu that ravaged egg farms is now creeping into broiler flocks, something experts feared. Farmers are culling sick chickens by the millions, tightening supply further. Shoppers report chicken sections picked clean, with remaining packs priced 20–30% higher than last year. It's a cruel twist. Just as consumers turn to chicken as a cheaper meat, it's vanishing. Processors can't keep up with demand as disease and costs hammer production. At this rate, even common cuts like drumsticks could be gone by March's end, a frightening prospect in our food system. Turkey, another poultry staple, is in dire straits. Turkeys have been hit hardest by avian influenza. Over 14 million turkeys dead since 2022, wiping out flocks nationwide. The USDA confirms 2024's turkey output plunged to 5.1 billion pounds, down 6.3% from an already weak 2023, marking the lowest production since 1985. This isn't just about Thanksgiving, it's about everyday protein. Supermarkets are struggling to stock deli turkey and ground turkey as supplies dry up. Prices fell briefly when holiday demand passed, but don't be fooled. That was the calm before the storm. With breeders decimated, replacement birds aren't there. Smaller poultry farms are folding under the disease pressure. Now, turkey products are evaporating from stores, leaving a protein gap that's hard to fill. Consumers who take turkey sandwiches for granted are in for a rude awakening when there's simply no turkey to be had. Beef. If you've strolled the meat aisle lately, you know something's very wrong. Beef is rapidly becoming an endangered item in groceries. Years of punishing drought and high feed costs forced ranchers into a massive herd cull. The U.S. cattle herd has shrunk to the smallest size since 1961. A jaw-dropping decline that's playing out now in record beef prices. Ranchers can't rebuild herds overnight. It takes years, and ongoing drought is keeping pastures parched. The consequence? Beef supplies are tightening to the point of scarcity. Analysts report beef prices up over 25% compared to last year, and climbing each week. Shoppers face empty coolers where affordable cuts used to be. Even ground beef is becoming a treasure. Demand is wildly outstripping supply, and by March, everyday Americans might be completely priced out of beef, if they can find it at all. The iconic centerpiece of dinner plates is teetering on the edge of availability. Pork. Pork supplies are unraveling globally, and the U.S. is not immune. A deadly wave of African swine fever has ravaged pig farms across Europe and Asia, decimating herds and constricting world supply. The EU, a major pork producer, expects output to keep falling, down about 3% by 2025 compared to just a few years ago. In Asia, countries like China and the Philippines have seen millions of pigs lost to disease, sending pork demand surging internationally. U.S. pork producers face skyrocketing feed costs and the threat of disease at our doorstep. Already, some U.S. processors are struggling to source hogs as farmers cut back herds. Bacon, ham, and chops are creeping up in price every week. Importantly, major exporters like Europe are diverting more pork domestically to cover their shortfall, meaning the U.S. can't rely on imports to fill the gap. The result is a slow-motion disappearance of pork from our stores. Consumers may soon discover that bacon has become a rarity, another casualty of this cascading food crisis. Milk. A milk shortage? It sounds unthinkable in America, yet it's unfolding. Dairy cows are producing less thanks to extreme weather and even disease. In a bizarre development, the avian flu virus jumped to dairy cattle in 2024, infecting hundreds of herds and causing fevers and lower milk output. While most cows recovered, the biosecurity lockdowns and culling of exposed animals hit dairies hard. Combine that with feed shortages from drought-ravaged hayfields and corn silos running low, and you have a recipe for shrunken milk supply. The USDA has quietly trimmed milk production forecasts. New Zealand, a top exporter, is also expecting a drop in milk output in 2025 due to environmental and economic pressures, tightening the global market. Already, shoppers are reporting 2% and whole milk out of stock in some stores. Those gallons that are available cost a fortune. Families are scrambling for alternatives as the one beverage we assumed was always abundant starts to fade. If trends hold, milk could virtually disappear from some grocery coolers within weeks, a once unimaginable dairy crisis. Butter. The ripple effects in dairy extend to butter, and it's severe. With milk production faltering, butter output has plunged, and prices have skyrocketed in tandem. In fact, butter prices are up by more than a third compared to last year, a spike that signals just how scarce cream and milk fat have become. Bakeries and food companies are bidding up every last pound of butter, leaving store shelves often empty. Customers report going store to store in search of a single box of butter. Climate impacts in key dairy regions, from heat stress on cows to floods ruining feed, mean the supply of cream used for butter is drying up. Even Europe, normally a butter surplus, is struggling, with stocks drawn down. This means no relief through imports. We're watching butter turn into a luxury good in real time. By late March, finding butter at a supermarket might be as rare as finding gold, with prices to match. It's a rich irony. In a country that once literally had government butter stockpiles, we're now facing a butter famine driven by nature's fury and economic strain. Cheese. Next in the dairy dominoes is cheese, and it's getting hit hard. Cheese production can't escape the milk squeeze. Less milk means less cheese, period. Factories are already scaling back, especially on longer-aged cheeses that tie up milk for months. The immediate crunch is in everyday cheeses: mozzarella, cheddar, American slices. Pizza shops are complaining of shortages in mozzarella. Sandwich chains are begging suppliers for cheese that isn't there. Prices for cheese have jumped nearly 10% in some markets amid bidding wars for limited supply. In Europe, a poor grazing season and high costs have similarly dented milk output, reducing cheese exports and keeping more product in the EU. The US can't easily import to make up the gap. Meanwhile, demand hasn't dropped. If anything, people are panic buying cheese to freeze it. It's a perfect storm: high demand, low supply, and no quick fix. We're approaching a point where shredded cheese and cheese blocks could disappear off grocery racks. Imagine walking into a supermarket dairy section and seeing bare cases where cheddar and Swiss used to be. That's the alarming scenario we face within weeks. Bread and flour. Wheat. In the bakery aisle, trouble is mounting with bread and flour thanks to a global wheat crunch. Climate disasters hammered wheat fields across multiple continents last year. Europe saw wheat output plunge to a 12-year low in 2024, after searing heat waves and droughts baked harvests from France to the Black Sea. The ripple effect tightened the world's grain supply just as war in Ukraine, a wheat-exporting powerhouse, continued to disrupt shipments. Now stockpiles are shrinking. The result? Flour mills are paying steep prices for wheat, and some are running at partial capacity due to grain shortages. Bread prices have surged and affordable loaves are scarce. In some regions, bakeries are rationing or using smaller packaging. The Food and Agriculture Organization, FAO, warns that global wheat trade is expected to drop, with reserves thin, meaning no cushion if any new disaster hits. Consumers are already encountering sporadic flour shortages in stores, and many brands of bread simply not available. As one farmer put it, "We're one bad storm away from empty bread shelves." If you think bread and flour will always be around, think again. By late March, these staples may be among the hardest to find, the casualty of failed harvests and geopolitical turmoil. Pasta. Pasta lovers, brace yourselves. Your spaghetti and macaroni are in jeopardy. The same wheat woes strangling bread are hitting durum wheat, the special variety used for pasta. Canada, one of the largest durum producers, faced brutal drought recently that cut yields sharply, and Europe's durum crop was poor as well. Italy, the home of pasta, had to contend with high costs for imported wheat last year, and even convened crisis talks as pasta prices spiked over 20%. Now in 2025, the stocks of durum are so tight that pasta manufacturers are warning of supply gaps. Supermarkets in some areas are already limiting purchases of pasta as demand outstrips supply. Consumers have noticed familiar brands missing. The pasta section has glaring empty spots. Factories simply can't get enough grain at a reasonable price, and some have reduced production runs. This is translating into an unprecedented pasta shortage. Those cheap boxes of penne or spaghetti could become a memory. At the current trajectory, by March's end you might walk down the pasta aisle and see nothing but a few stray boxes of obscure shapes, if even that. The world's most beloved budget meal is slipping out of reach, a sobering reminder that no food, however basic, is safe from this crisis. Rice. Rice, the staple food for over half the planet, is entering a danger zone of scarcity. On paper, global rice production hit a record high, but that's misleading comfort. Extreme weather has made regional harvests wildly unpredictable. In 2024, monsoon rains in Asia were erratic and flood-prone. China's crops suffered, and India imposed a sudden ban on rice exports to protect its own supply. That export ban sent shockwaves through rice-dependent countries, causing panic buying and empty store shelves from Southeast Asia to West Africa. Even months later, the effects linger. Some countries saw retail rice prices 37% higher in late 2024 than a year before, straining household budgets. Here in the U.S., we're not major rice consumers compared to Asia, but we're still feeling it. Importers struggle to source specialty rices, and domestic growers face high fertilizer costs, partly due to the war in Ukraine squeezing fertilizer supply. Certain rice varieties are already hard to find. The irony is rich. At a time of record global production, supermarket shelves tell a different story: dwindling stock and rising prices. If India's poor harvest last year and Thailand's drought continue to curb exports, by March, we could witness something unthinkable: rice scarcity in markets worldwide, including ours. It's a slow-brewing disaster for food security, about to boil over. Corn. Corn is everywhere in our food system, and that's why its shortage is so devastating. From corn flour and tortillas to corn-fed meat and even sodas, think corn syrup, we all rely on it. Unfortunately, 2024 dealt heavy blows to corn crops in key regions. Historic floods in the U.S. Midwest washed out fields, and toxic mold flourished in soaked grains, ruining silos of corn. In other areas, blistering heat stunted growth. Meanwhile, Brazil and Argentina saw erratic weather slash their corn yields, tightening global supply. The consequences are rippling through the supply chain. Livestock producers can't find enough affordable corn feed, forcing cuts in herd sizes, which further hurts meat and dairy supply. Tortilla factories in Mexico faced such a crunch that the government intervened to stabilize prices. Here in the U.S., corn-based products from cornmeal to breakfast cereal are creeping up in cost or quietly shrinking in package size. Some stores have even run out of certain cornmeal brands and corn grits due to supply interruptions. The USDA's own outlook for 2025 hints at lower corn exports from major producers because there simply isn't the surplus. By end of March, expect corn-dependent foods to be scarcer and costlier than ever. Corn may not always be visible in your grocery cart, but its absence will be painfully clear when prices for everything it's in jump or the products themselves don't show up at all. Coffee. Your morning cup of coffee is in peril. In the past year, coffee prices have absolutely exploded due to climate disasters in the world's top growing regions. Brazil, which supplies a third of the world's coffee, was racked by one of the worst droughts on record, then unexpected frosts. The result? Brazil's coffee stockpiles have been nearly depleted, with warehouses sitting almost empty. Farmers sold off most of the 2024 crop early, and there's little left to tide us over until the next harvest. Globally, demand for coffee is now set to outstrip production for the fourth time in 6 years, drawing down whatever inventories remain. Prices for Arabica beans have doubled, hitting all-time highs above $4.30 a pound. Robusta, used in instant coffee, isn't far behind, up over 70%. What this means in the grocery aisle: coffee shortages. Many brands are downsizing their offerings or putting out blends with more filler beans. Some cheap coffees have vanished entirely because no beans are cheap anymore. Roasters can't source enough high-quality beans, so they're cutting back production. Coffee sections in stores are shrinking, and the remaining stock comes with shockingly high price tags. Don't be surprised if by March, your favorite coffee is either impossible to find or simply unaffordable. This isn't just a price hike, it's a supply collapse fueled by climate chaos that shows no sign of abating. Chocolate. Cocoa. The world is running out of chocolate as we know it. A silent crisis in West Africa's cocoa fields, prolonged drought and disease has crimped supply of cocoa beans, the key ingredient in chocolate. The numbers are frightening. Cocoa prices have soared to record highs, with a 163% jump year on year. Yes, more than double by early 2025. Major chocolate makers are panicking as their raw ingredient costs go through the roof. Some are already warning of recipe changes and smaller package sizes to cope. But the most immediate impact is at the grocery store. Chocolate bars and cocoa powder are starting to disappear from shelves. Imports are delayed or canceled as suppliers struggle to find beans. Candy aisles have empty gaps where popular chocolates used to sit. Even baking chocolate and cocoa mix are in short supply. And when you do find them, the price is astronomical, turning what was once an everyday treat into an extravagance. The Valentine's Day chocolate shortage of 2025 made headlines, but this is no seasonal blip. It's a long-term scarcity. Experts say these cocoa deficits could last for years unless production somehow rebounds, which is unlikely amid continuing climate extremes. So brace for a world where chocolate is brutally expensive or missing altogether, a casualty of drought and our insatiable appetite colliding disastrously. Sugar. Sweetness is becoming scarce. A global sugar shortage is unfolding as erratic weather pummels the world's top sugar producers. India, normally a sugar powerhouse, saw its harvest wither under the weakest monsoon in 5 years, then drown in untimely rains. The outcome? India's output is projected to fall well below domestic needs, the first shortfall in 8 years, prompting the government to halt exports entirely. Thailand, another big exporter, is suffering a severe drought that may slash its sugar output by 20% this season. All this has drained global sugar stockpiles to crisis levels. Analysts estimate a 5.4 million ton deficit in world sugar supply for 2023 to 24, a gap so large that even Brazil's record harvest can't fill it. In stores, sugar is already rationed in some places. Prices have hit decade highs, and bakers and food manufacturers are feeling the squeeze. Expect more empty shelves in the baking aisle. No sugar means no packaged cookies, no candies, no sweetened cereals. In some developing countries, sugar shortages are sparking public outcries and government interventions. Here at home, those cheap bags of sugar are disappearing, and the cost of any remaining stock is jaw-dropping. The world's sweet tooth is now at the mercy of the climate, and for now, the climate is not playing nice. Sugar, one of the most basic pantry staples, might become virtually impossible to find by March's end, turning our food system even more bitter. Olive oil, liquid gold. That's what olive oil has become. A year of brutal drought across the Mediterranean, especially in Spain and Italy, obliterated olive harvests and sent olive oil prices into the stratosphere. Spain, which normally feeds the world's olive oil needs, saw yields plunge to historic lows amid bone-dry conditions and heat. This created a domino effect. Global olive oil supplies collapsed, and prices hit records, reaching €9, €10 per liter at the peak in Europe. While late rains and a new harvest are offering a glimmer of relief, it's too little too late for the current shortage. Supermarkets across Europe and North America have literally run out of olive oil at times, or are stocking tiny quantities at absurd prices. Theft of olive oil became a problem in some places, underscoring how valuable it's become. As of now, the European Commission expects a 30% increase in olive oil production this season. But that supply hasn't fully hit the market yet, and Italy is still facing a huge deficit, 27% output. That means the shelves won't refill fast enough. Consumers are encountering empty cooking oil aisles or finding only lower-grade oils mixed with substitutes. Chefs and households are scrambling for alternatives like sunflower or canola oil, but those too are strained. If you see olive oil in stock, know that it's a fleeting sight. Until the new harvest is processed and distributed, which could be after March, olive oil will remain one of the hardest-to-find items, a far cry from its once plentiful presence in our pantries. Vegetable oils, sunflower and others. Think you can swap olive oil for other cooking oils? Think again. They're in short supply too. Sunflower oil, corn oil, palm oil, canola oil, all have been hit by converging catastrophes. The war in Ukraine choked the supply of sunflower oil from the world's breadbasket, and on top of that, drought in Eastern Europe further slashed sunflower seed yields. The result was a 56% jump in sunflower oil prices and sporadic shortages, with some stores in 2024 rationing purchases. Now add palm oil to the mix. A developing El Niño weather pattern is bringing drought to Southeast Asia, threatening palm plantations and cutting yields. Major palm exporters Indonesia and Malaysia have also toyed with export restrictions to ensure local supply, which tightens the global market. Meanwhile, North America's canola rapeseed crop faced dry spells in Canada, limiting production. All these oils are somewhat interchangeable in food manufacturing, so a hit to one forces companies to scramble for others, cascading the shortage. We're now seeing empty shelves where cooking oils normally sit, or maybe a few overpriced bottles left. Restaurants and food producers are feeling the pain and passing it on. Frying oil is more expensive. Packaged foods contain less oil or use reformulated, inferior recipes. By March, if you haven't secured a backup bottle of your preferred cooking oil, you might be out of luck. This is a multifaceted oil crisis not seen in decades. A combination of war, weather, and trade policies that has made even basic vegetable oil a hard-to-find commodity. Tomatoes and tomato sauce. Tomato products are teetering on the edge of a massive shortage brought about by extreme weather that hammered harvests. California, which grows 95% of America's processing tomatoes, the kind used for sauce and ketchup, has been whipsawed by drought and then sudden floods. In recent years, heat waves and water shortages shrank California tomato yields by 5–10%, depleting the reserves of tomato paste. The situation got so dire that ketchup prices spiked 28% in a year, and processors warned of the latest looming food shortage featuring this beloved condiment. Globally, it's not better. Major tomato-growing regions in Europe, Spain, Italy, also endured blistering heat that reduced output. The net effect: canned tomatoes, pasta sauces, salsa, ketchup, they're all scarce. Shoppers are reporting empty spots in the canned goods aisle where tomato sauce and diced tomatoes once were plentiful. Some brands of ketchup are completely sold out, and restaurants are scrambling to source tomato sauce for their recipes. The winter rains in California provided a bit of relief and hope for the next planting, but any rebound will come too late for the current crisis. We have to get through the tail end of this shortage first. Expect pasta nights without sauce, burgers without ketchup, a culinary nightmare that is becoming reality. Unless you've stocked up on tomato products, you might find them virtually impossible to buy in the coming weeks, a testament to how climate change can even take a bite out of our favorite foods. Oranges and orange juice. A citrus catastrophe is unfolding, nowhere more evident than in Florida's iconic orange groves. Back-to-back disasters, aggressive plant disease, and powerful hurricanes have gutted Florida's orange production to levels not seen since the Great Depression. The latest USDA report forecasts Florida will produce only 12 million boxes of oranges this season, the smallest crop since 1930. Think about that. We're basically down to a sliver of what used to be a thriving industry. Hurricanes like Ian and the recent Milton obliterated groves, and a relentless citrus greening disease has slowly strangled trees over the past decade. Overall, U.S. orange output is the lowest since 1937. What this means in stores: orange juice is becoming a luxury. Futures prices for OJ hit record highs above $5 a pound, which translates to exorbitant prices on the shelf, if juice is even in stock. Many retailers can't get enough supply. Some are stocking smaller bottles or rationing inventory to keep any juice on the shelf at all. Fresh oranges are similarly scarce and costly. Importing more from abroad, Brazil, Mexico, is an option, but global supplies are tight and prices are high everywhere. We're on the cusp of orange juice shortages rivaling the 1970s Great Orange Juice Panic, only this time it's worse because the trees themselves are in long-term decline. By the end of March, finding a carton of orange juice might be next to impossible unless you're willing to pay an eye-popping price. One of the simplest morning pleasures is under threat, another victim of nature's wrath and our faltering resilience. Bananas. The world's most popular fruit is facing a devastating blight that could make bananas a rarity. A deadly fungus known as Tropical Race 4, TR4, is sweeping through banana plantations globally, and it has now firmly established itself in Latin America, the source of the bananas on U.S. shelves. This soil-borne disease, also called Panama disease, targets Cavendish bananas, which make up about 95% of global banana exports and around half of all bananas grown worldwide. TR4 effectively wipes out entire banana farms, and once soil is contaminated, bananas can't be grown there again. Scientists and the FAO warn that if TR4 continues to spread unchecked, it could annihilate the Cavendish banana crop. We are starting to see the effects. Banana supplies are tightening, prices are inching up, and quality is slipping, smaller bruised fruit as growers fight the disease. Some smaller growers have already gone bankrupt as their plantations succumb. In grocery stores, you might have noticed fewer bananas or more frequent out-of-stock signs where the banana display usually stands tall. This is only the beginning. If TR4 hits a major exporter like Ecuador or Costa Rica hard, it could suddenly choke off the banana pipeline. Imagine a world with virtually no bananas. It's not science fiction. It's a looming reality if this disease isn't stopped. By late March, we could be in a situation where bananas are extremely hard to find in supermarkets, or available only in tiny quantities at a premium price. A fruit that symbolized reliable abundance year-round is now a symbol of how vulnerable our food supply really is. Berries. Fresh berries, strawberries, blueberries, raspberries have been at the mercy of chaotic weather and labor shortages, making them increasingly scarce. These delicate fruits are heavily dependent on precise conditions and timely harvesting. But climate change has other plans. Unexpected frosts, heat waves, and downpours have all hit berry farms in succession. California's strawberry fields suffered anomalous cold snaps and then intense heat, damaging blossoms and shortening seasons. Blueberry farms in the Pacific Northwest and Europe got slammed by record heat that literally cooked berries on the vine. To make matters worse, farms are struggling to find harvest workers, especially in the U.S., where immigration crackdowns and visa delays have left fields understaffed. The USDA has pointed out that crops like berries and apples, which rely on migrant labor, could rot unpicked if policies reduce the available workforce. We're seeing that scenario play out. Reports of berries left to spoil because there was nobody to gather them. The outcome in stores is glaring. Berry sections often picked clean, with what's left being overripe or overpriced. Shoppers have noted that sales and discounts on berries have vanished. It's full price or nothing, and that's if you find them in stock. By the end of March, the peak of what normally is import season from the southern hemisphere, we may find even those overseas berries are limited due to global demand and climate hits in places like Chile or Mexico. In short, the juicy berries that once overflowed in plastic clamshells at the store are becoming a rarity, an early casualty of both climate volatility and a faltering labor pipeline. Leafy greens. Salads are turning into a luxury as leafy greens become harder to find. The delicate lettuces, spinaches, and kales that fill our salad bowls have been battered by disease and extreme weather. Remember the lettuce shortage a while back? We're diving into a worse one. California and Arizona, salad bowl of America, have faced untimely freezes and unseasonal downpours that ruined entire plantings of lettuce. In 2022, a virus combined with heat decimated California's lettuce crop, causing nationwide shortages and record prices. Now, in 2024-25, heavy rains followed by heat waves led to fungus and rot in spinach and greens fields. Yields have plunged, and farmers are planting less to avoid losing money on ruined crops. On the other side of the world, erratic weather in key vegetable regions, like China's Shandong province or Italy's Po Valley, also reduced leafy green output, meaning less to import. Consumers are seeing the effects. Bagged salad mixes often missing from shelves or far too expensive. Some restaurants have pulled salads off the menu because they can't secure lettuce at a reasonable cost. What's next? If another cold snap or heat wave strikes the remaining winter crops in Arizona, we could effectively run out of domestic lettuce for a spell. Imagine going to the grocery store and finding no lettuce, no spinach, no leafy greens at all. That scenario is entirely plausible in the coming weeks. We're dangerously close to it. The tender greens that we take as a given depend on a stable climate, and stability is something we no longer have. Onions. The humble onion, cornerstone of cuisines worldwide, is at the center of a global shortage firestorm. Bad weather and policy reactions have created an onion crisis spanning multiple countries. In South Asia, erratic rainfall hammered onion harvests in 2023. In India, a weak monsoon followed by untimely floods cut yields drastically, and the government responded by banning onion exports into 2024 to keep domestic prices in check. That export ban was a gut punch to countries like Bangladesh, Nepal, and the Philippines, which rely on Indian onions. Suddenly, their markets were short millions of tons, and prices skyrocketed. The Philippines saw onion prices leap so high in late 2022, early 2023, that they briefly cost more per pound than meat, leading to emergency imports and raids on hoarders. In Europe, a poor harvest the year prior had already left onion stocks low, and prices there hit records at the start of 2024. So what do we have now? A world onion market that's been described as from glut to deficit overnight. Here in the U.S., we normally grow plenty of onions, but we're not immune. Our onion farmers are contending with water shortages in the West and cold snaps in the Midwest that have dented yields. Plus, with global prices high, some domestic onions get exported for better profit, which means fewer for local grocery chains. Shoppers are seeing smaller onions, lower quality, and yes, higher prices. Some stores in the Northeast even reported running out of onions during the holiday season and having to scramble supplies from far away. It sounds absurd, but by March we might talk about onions the way we talk about truffles, expensive and hard to find. When one of the cheapest, most common vegetables goes scarce, you know the food system is in deep trouble. Potatoes. Potato shortages are hitting, and they're no small potatoes. Extreme weather has brutalized potato crops in multiple regions, leading to a shortfall in supply that's driving prices up and availability down. In Europe, 2023 was a disaster for potatoes. In the UK, relentless rain caused countless tons of potatoes to rot in the fields or storage, while earlier in the year, heat waves had stressed the plants. The result? British potato prices exploded, reaching all-time highs at £1,750 per ton, up 87% from the previous year, as reported in the agricultural markets. Fish and chip shops were floored by the cost of spuds, and some even shut down temporarily. Across the Channel, countries like Germany and France also had subpar harvests, so Europe as a whole had a shortage. This means frozen fries, chips, crisps, and fresh potatoes were all in limited supply. In the U.S., the Pacific Northwest had a smaller crop due to a summer heat dome, and storage losses were higher than usual. Fast food chains have quietly warned about potential fry shortages, and consumers are seeing fewer bulk potato sales and more empty bins at the supermarket. If you love baked potatoes or homemade fries, you might have noticed the selection getting thinner and the potatoes on offer looking more picked over. This is only set to worsen as we draw from the bottom of the storage bins before new crops come in. Don't be surprised if your favorite potato products are missing by March. Some grocery stores may have a literal potato famine on their hands, reminiscent of bygone eras. It's a stark reminder that even the most starchy, hardy crops are not safe from the chaos of climate and supply chain breakdowns. Chili peppers and hot sauce. Feel that burn? It's not your tongue, it's the heat of a hot sauce shortage intensifying. Chili peppers, the fiery soul of hot sauces like the iconic sriracha, have been wilting under severe drought. In northern Mexico, where the red jalapeno peppers for sriracha are grown, a once-in-a-century drought struck over the past couple of years. The harvests failed so badly that Wreaking Foods, maker of sriracha, had to halt production in 2022 and again in 2023, declaring a shortage of chili paste. Fast forward to 2025, and the problem persists. The drought eased only slightly, and chili crops remain below normal. Wreaking has warned that the sriracha shortage is ongoing into 2025, and fans have noticed bottles of the famous hot sauce disappeared from supermarket shelves or are selling for outrageous prices on the secondary market. It's not just sriracha. Other hot sauces and chili products are feeling the pinch as global chili pepper supply tightens. India, another big chili producer, had erratic rains that hurt its chili crop too. The consequence is a world shortage of spice. For consumers, this means empty spots in the condiment aisle where the hot sauce used to be. Your favorite salsa might taste different as companies reformulate with fewer or milder peppers. If you love cooking with fresh jalapenos, serranos, or habaneros, you've likely noticed them pricier and occasionally missing from produce sections. It's an alarming moment when something as small as a pepper can cause a big disruption in our culinary lives. By March, if conditions don't drastically improve, hot sauces could become the latest black market grocery item, with people trading tips on where to find a bottle. The climate has literally taken the spice out of life, and we're feeling every bit of it. Spices and seasonings. Beyond chili peppers, a broad spice crisis is brewing. The spices and herbs that add flavor to our food are often sourced from far-flung places that are being hammered by climate and chaos. Take vanilla from Madagascar. Cyclones and instability have caused wild swings in production, sending vanilla prices sky-high in recent years. Or consider black pepper from Vietnam and India. Erratic rainfall patterns have led to smaller harvests and volatile prices. Droughts in the Middle East are even threatening the supply of cumin and coriander. We don't often think about these ingredients until they're gone. Now, many shoppers are getting unpleasant surprises. The spice aisle has tags that read "out of stock" on items like cumin, paprika, or certain dried herb blends. Importers say shipments are delayed or partially filled because suppliers overseas are struggling with poor crop yields or supply chain disruptions. Even salt production has been affected in some areas by unusual rains or heat affecting evaporation ponds. Though salt is one thing we won't run out of globally, it's just getting pricier to refine and ship. The main issue is that our intricate web of spice trade is fraying under stress. In some parts of Asia, red chili prices jumped 10% in late 2024, and garlic prices spiked due to heavy rains and floods. It all adds up. For the average consumer, it might mean your favorite seasoning mix isn't available, or that tiny jar of spice now costs twice what it did last year. By spring 2025, we could see a scenario where many common spices are scarce in grocery stores, forcing cooks to improvise. It's a subtle but telling sign of how deep the food crisis runs. Not only is the basic sustenance at risk, but even the flavors that make food enjoyable are fading. Seafood. The seas are no refuge from this crisis. In fact, seafood shortages are starting to bite. Overfishing has long strained the oceans, but now climate change is turning up the heat, literally, and disrupting marine ecosystems that communities rely on for fish. We're seeing freak events, marine heat waves triggering massive fish die-offs, like salmon in the Pacific Northwest struggling as river temperatures rise, or cod and lobster shifting their ranges northward, leaving traditional fishing grounds empty. One dramatic example is Peru's anchovy fishery, one of the largest single-species fisheries on Earth, which was essentially shut down in 2023 due to El Niño conditions. The Peruvian government canceled the anchovy season when surveys found too few adult fish, a move that sent shockwaves through the global fish meal and aquaculture industry. Anchovies are a key feed for farmed fish and also end up in pet foods and supplements. Closer to home, the Gulf of Mexico's shrimp catch has been dismal, and New England's fishermen are facing quota cuts on everything from scallops to haddock because stocks are down. The upshot at the grocery store: higher prices and less availability for seafood. Canned tuna prices are up, and certain varieties, like mackerel or sardines, are harder to find as demand shifts to them from other depleted stocks. Fresh fish counters are carrying a smaller selection, often with fish flown in from far away, with a hefty price tag, because local sources are drying up. Even frozen fish sticks and breaded shrimp in the freezer aisle aren't immune. Producers are facing raw material shortages. If El Niño continues to strengthen into 2025, we could see global fisheries output drop further, meaning by March and beyond, the seafood case might be one of the emptiest parts of the supermarket. It's a bitter irony that on a blue planet we could be facing a seafood scarcity, but that's the path we're on. Infant formula. Among the most unsettling shortages is infant formula, a life-essential product for many babies that has proven shockingly vulnerable. Just a couple of years ago, a major contamination-related shutdown at a formula plant triggered a nationwide crisis, with parents scouring stores and the internet for any available cans to feed their infants. That exposed how concentrated the formula industry is. A handful of factories produce most of the supply, and how fragile those supply lines are. Fast forward to 2025, and while the acute crisis was mitigated by emergency imports and plant reopenings, the situation remains precarious. Supply chain analysts warn that formula stock is again tightening due to a combination of factors: dairy supply issues, less milk means less base powder for formula, labor shortages in manufacturing, and still lingering logistical challenges. Some specialty formulas are backordered for weeks. Parents have noticed stores imposing purchasing limits on formula cans once more, a telltale sign of scarcity. This time, government agencies and the USDA are trying to get ahead of it. But frankly, if another big hiccup happens, say a recall or a production line failure, we could be right back in a full-blown shortage, and even worse given the overall food climate. The thought of formula being impossible to find is terrifying for caregivers, yet it's a very real risk. By the end of March, without significant improvements, we may see rationing and panic demand surges emptying out whatever formula is on shelves. No parent should have to worry about feeding their infant, but that's exactly what's at stake here, making this one of the most urgent shortages to address. Breakfast cereal. A morning staple is at stake as breakfast cereal supplies dwindle under the pressure of multiple ingredient shortages. Think about what goes into your cereal: grains, wheat, corn, oats, rice, sugar, maybe nuts or dried fruit, all items that are currently in short supply. We've detailed how wheat, corn, and sugar are facing crises. Those directly translate into trouble for cereal makers. In addition, oats had a tough season not long ago. A drought in the Canadian prairies sent oat prices soaring and squeezed the supply of oats for oatmeal and cereal. Cereal companies are being hit from all sides: grain prices up, sweetener prices up, energy costs up for running their factories, and transportation snarls. They've tried to cope by shrinking package sizes and quietly discontinuing less popular varieties to focus on the basics. Even so, we've started seeing some cereal brands out of stock for extended periods. Maybe your grocery store is missing that one type of bran flakes you like, or the variety pack of oatmeal has fewer options. It's not your imagination. Production is strained. Cornflakes, for instance, depend on plentiful corn. And with corn yields down and being diverted to animal feed, there's less for human foods. A major cereal producer warned late last year that if grain inflation continues, they'd have to make tough choices on product lines. Now those tough choices are here. Kids' favorite sugary cereals might be harder to find as companies allocate limited ingredients to their top sellers only. And if the shortages worsen, we could see temporary shutdowns of cereal production lines, meaning empty cereal aisles at the store. By March, the simplest of breakfasts, a bowl of cereal, could become a luxury of the past if these trends don't reverse. It's a domino effect from the fields to the breakfast table, and the dominoes are falling fast. Canned vegetables and soups. When fresh produce falters, people turn to canned goods, but now even canned vegetables and soups are under threat. Canned food relies on two things: a steady supply of crops to can and materials, like metal cans, to package them. Both are in trouble. The vegetable shortages we described, tomatoes, potatoes, corn, etc., mean that canneries simply have less product to put into cans. For instance, the shortage of tomatoes has led to fewer cans of tomato soup and canned pasta sauce. Green bean and corn yields were down in some areas too, so those big stacks of canned beans and corn at the store are smaller than usual. During the pandemic years, inventories were drawn down by high demand, and companies haven't fully rebuilt them because subsequent harvests have been erratic. On the packaging side, the cost of tin plate steel for cans went up, partly due to global supply chain issues and tariffs, and aluminum for lids is pricier too. Some smaller canneries have had trouble sourcing enough cans on time, slowing their operations. Now consumers are noticing that certain canned soups, veggies, and broths are frequently sold out. Maybe you wanted chicken noodle soup. Well, if poultry is scarce, so is that soup. This creates a vicious cycle. As fresh items become scarce or costly, more people buy canned, which then exacerbates the canned shortage. Food banks are also under strain, as they rely on cheap canned goods which are no longer so cheap or available. By the end of this quarter, we could see a scenario where the canned food aisle has large gaps, the exact opposite of what we expect in an emergency. When even emergency staples like canned soup become scarce, it's clear that the food system is stretched to a breaking point. We're nearly there. The situation is stark and the clock is ticking. These 30 items paint a picture of a food supply in crisis: eggs gone, meat scarce, produce decimated, pantry staples dwindling. It's a convergence of calamities we normally see in isolation, now happening all at once. Disease outbreaks, extreme weather disasters, war-induced trade disruptions, inflation, and supply chain breakdowns. Each factor alone would be serious. Together, they are pushing us into uncharted territory where grocery store shelves resemble those of a war-torn country or a bygone era of scarcity. It's urgent, it's alarming, and it's real. But we are not helpless. Now is the time for action, both individual and collective. Stock up on essential items whenever and wherever you find them available, without hoarding irresponsibly, because delays can mean the difference between having basics or going without. Focus on non-perishables and versatile foods: rice, canned goods, dried beans, pasta, things that can carry you through if fresh options vanish. Consider alternative sources and substitutions. If your store runs out of something, think of farmers markets, local farms, or co-ops that might have supplies. Learn to use substitutes in cooking. Can't find butter? Maybe cooking oil or ghee, no eggs? Use flaxseed or applesauce in recipes as a stopgap. Flexibility will be key in this new normal. Importantly, stay informed. Keep up with USDA alerts, supply chain news, and local store reports on what's running low. Awareness can give you a critical head start. Support policies and programs that strengthen our food system's resilience. Whether it's investing in climate-resilient agriculture, strategic food reserves, or fair trade that keeps supplies moving.